Hey everyone, we are finally back for another public update video, and by we I mean with me as always is Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
So, the good news, despite us having been sort of gone for a while regarding public update videos, is we've been making a lot of progress this whole time. It was just stuff that at the time we could not talk about or show you at all, and luckily there's some stuff now we can start to talk about and show you. So let's start with Damon Claw. As we mentioned, I think back in our previous update video, we've been working on establishing the sort of graphic style for all things Damon Claw related that we can use across the board for marketing. We're getting ready for a much bigger visibility push across social media and all that. So in anticipation of that, we really wanted to get all of the art and design underway for things like Steam pages and posts on social media and all that. Corey has done a fantastic, as always, job not only designing but actually making the final very nice, clean, and good-looking versions of lots of different elements, and just nailing and finalizing the colors, the textures, the fonts that we'll be using for all of that related stuff. And in the meantime, we've also been making actual progress on the game. But one of the big things is some stuff that I've kind of upgraded or caught back up to where it should be, so to speak. So I'm going to splice in right now the walking animation that everyone was used to. This was a 3-frame, we call it ping pong style animation, just bouncing back and forth. Even though it looked fine, and even though the character we jokingly call Matt, Damon Claw, he's almost never just walking, he's rolling, jumping, attacking. It didn't look bad in the context of the game, but it was in a way the last glaring element of unnecessary limitation because of the way Damon Claw evolved as a game project.
Right.
So it was unnecessarily limited. So I finally basically upgraded it to this new walking animation, which you should be seeing now if future Mike does a good job in editing. Aside from that, speaking of upgrading what was already there in Damon Claw, one of the other big upgrades we made during the evolution of Damon Claw was increasing the camera scroll vertically and adding diagonal slopes the character could walk on, and the enemies, of course, throughout some of the levels. And what happened is the game was designed to work one way. We added all of these enhancements, but we were focusing on creating what's called a vertical slice of just levels 1 and 2. So I had never fixed what got broken in that process of adding this new functionality to levels 3 and 4. So they were quite comically broken. Like you would hit an enemy and they would just get stuck in their hit animation and become a hologram sliding backwards of a hit enemy. And this ties into that visibility push. I wanted to get, and I now have, some really strong new clips of all the 4 levels that we've got going so far. And that's when I discovered, when I was recording this footage, like, oh yeah, wow, I really need to catch up levels 3 and 4. So not only did I fix those like really big and funny bugs, but I also was able to take some time and start to really balance the gameplay like they are so carefully balanced in especially level 1 but level 2 as well. And then finally I added some additional, which I'll be splicing in more footage, additional artwork that was missing on some kind of half-finished stuff that was in levels 3 and 4. So that's some of the tangible progress. That was kind of polishing up what we already had and catching things up. But also I've made quite a bit of progress, which unfortunately I can't show any of. We're going to keep that for later. But the level 2 boss, he's now largely functional. None of it is polished with the timing and the physics, but his general AI is working and he does all the moves he's supposed to and all that stuff. That's it for actual tangible progress on the game itself. But the other thing that I've been working on while Corey was working on all of the other marketing related art is what will be the actual box art for the physical version of the game. So that was a huge project. First, Corey and I worked out the general layout, super rough with scribbles. And then I've been slowly in a cool program called Art Rage, which simulates actual paint on textures like paper and canvas exceptionally well. I've been doing a very high-res digital painting of the box art, and it kind of in 2 steps. The first step, which is now done, is getting it looking good enough and detailed enough and clean enough that we could do small versions to show what the boxed version will look like on marketing and pages and stuff like that. But it wouldn't survive scrutiny like zoomed in or printed out as a big poster. But that's the next step I'll be getting into, is furthering the levels of detail and polish. You know, we already have a link on our website to Bitbeam Canon swag, but there's very little product yet. But this art will allow us to finally start offering some swag specific to our games, like posters and t-shirts and mugs and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's been part of my side of it too, is just the graphic design of things like logos or even our branding type stuff, getting all of that cleaned up and in the high enough res and vectorized formats and things like that we can use for anything, which would include swag or whatever, you know, but really mostly for the various places we need to get the word out about the game. So we have a universal set of things to work with to get that out there. The box art is, I can tell you though, it's looking really amazing.
Awesome.
So
yeah, like future me will now, while I'm speaking, actually splice in some super zoomed in, kind of slightly out of context little portions of the box art I'm working on, so people can get the general idea of how some of the box art will look. It's all still unfinished. It's going to continue to get more detail, and I'm really shooting for, this is almost dooming me to not live up to expectations, but I'm really shooting for the hand-painted box art and book covers of some of the best AAA games, more Dungeons and Dragons style games, and also like not just their games, but their books and their gaming modules. Amazing artists like Larry Elmore and Clyde Caldwell. I'm trying to evoke that kind of feeling of you can actually see the texture of the painting and the brushstrokes, but there's still a lot of time put into a high level of detail and texture and all that stuff. So that's the goal. It's going to be several more weeks working as I can to like zoom in on every element and just keep detailing and polishing it. And I'm doing it in layers. That's one of the fantastic benefits to working digitally. You know, there's the hero, there's different enemies, there's the environment also in different layers of depth. So fantastic graphic designers like Corey will be able to take the same art, move and scale and whatever, they'll edit the layers around as needed to perfectly fit the formatting and aspect ratio of any particular piece of marketing or packaging art that we might end up needing. So it just gives it drastically more flexibility than if you just do it all as just a painting on canvas on one layer, and then you basically have to figure out ways to crop and zoom and just make the best with what you've got. All right, now it's time to move over to Metro Siege. And the reason that there hasn't been a lot of tangible progress that we can show right now in Metro Siege is because Alex Brown, the programmer, got hit with a double whammy of a prolonged crunch time for his day job with a super strict deadline, so he had to dedicate a huge chunk of his time and energy there, that, you know, the majority of it, and simultaneously just a big family responsibility that lasted a long time. So basically he was mostly out of commission for the last like 2 months or something. The good news is I had been creating other artwork so that once he's back, which he now is, he'll have all these things he can do. And I also have been playing through the game and making a concise list. We use GitHub. I've now set up all of these issues, these tickets for him, and it's just so nice and organized. And I know from past experiences with Alex, having a concise list, and a lot of these things aren't like big, giant, challenging tasks like some of the incredible stuff he's done already with Metro Siege, getting all of this parallax scrolling working and all that stuff. Okay, so I've accidentally with the mouse selected Alex, so one of the things that needs to be fixed, if you both select the same character and get into the game, you will see that both characters look exactly the same. So Obviously that can get very confusing. That's the mouse controlled one. It's he's just walking up in the corner. He's afraid. If I wiggle the mouse, I can get him walking the other way. There we go. But you could imagine that would be extremely confusing, especially if like one player got thrown right near the other and there's a crowd of people. You might literally forget or not know for a moment which of the two characters you're controlling. So the plan always was for some variant. If both players select the same character, you're going to get the same type of character with the same controls and the same general build and stuff, but they'll actually look different so that you'll have a much more enjoyable time and it won't seem like a half-finished feature in the game or a bug.
Right.
So just like 2 days ago, I made the repaint of this Alex character here so that as soon as Alex, the programmer, not Alex the character, is ready, he can program in that feature and actually get it working. And then in the meantime, I can do the repaints for the other characters. But basically, there's just this nice, juicy list of all of these tasks that Alex can kind of plow through and search and destroy and get the game much more toward the state of finishedness than it currently is. And as I mentioned in a past update a long time ago, the big goal now with Metro Siege is get the skeleton of the game. Let me quit out of here and actually show you guys. Right now, most of the partially working work-in-progress levels, they're only accessible by the level select menu. Let's see what level 5 is, for example. So this is fine for testing while the level is very work-in-progress, and we're just trying to get all of the functionality working. But what we really need to do now is get a very strong feel for the pacing and length of the entire game so we can perfect as we clean up. This is placeholder art, by the way, just we got it working. So the next step will be, as we're cleaning up the art, we also need to perfect the length of this level. And to do that, we need to know if we put all of the levels in consecutive order, and even for now, we'll have to just recycle the thugs from levels 1, 2, and 3, because those already exist. We can properly chain all the levels together, get in the right amount of thugs, and recycle good old Officer Bob as the end boss of all levels. And that way we'll be able to play through a kind of skeletal version of the whole game and get an exact feeling for, oh, this level should be shorter, this level should be longer, we really need to introduce a new thug or enemy here to make sure it never gets boring or repetitive feeling, but also never ends too quickly. So right. That's the big thing. And simultaneously, the same thing, Alex also has the placeholder art for the opening cinematic so that he can not only get the opening cinematic in, but that same technology, that same code can be reused for any other moment in the game where we really want to have like a very brief, especially cinematic interlude where we might want to have a zoomed in look at the character's face while they're reacting to something.
Absolutely,
so, yeah, the game is definitely going to be light on that. Mostly we're working the progression of the story right into the gameplay, and in those moments where you want and expect a little reprieve from the gameplay, like while it has to be loading the next level anyway and it's tallying your score, we have a quick intro dialogue for every boss fight and then an outro dialogue for the boss fight. And those are the ways we're very fluidly keeping the story unfolding for the players as they play, in a way where you're never like rolling your eyes and sighing and going, okay, and pressing the button a million times to get past it. Right. So yeah. we're working hard to find that balance, but that's another reason we want the whole game in rough working, so we could get a feeling for the whole flow and we could perfect exactly what art we need where, so we also never end up wasting time doing art that doesn't make it into the final cut of the game because we realized, oh, that's redundant or that makes it the level too long or whatever. We can perfect the pacing of the game, the fun factor, the storytelling, and then in the polishing stage, we know we're working on exactly what's going to end up in the finished game, and we know exactly how it should be and how it should look. Anyway, that's, yeah, I'm super excited about both of these projects. But now let's talk about the final project that we want to talk about is We used to call it Scorpion Boy. We came up with our official name, and the logo is now designed, so that's called Aeon's Legend. And I'm going to run the game in its current state for the Sega Mega Drive, and we're using Scorpion Engine, this amazing, legit retro game authoring system made by Eric Hogan. Shout out to Eric Hogan. It's an amazing game authoring tool. And at first it started only being able to export games for classic Amiga computers, but he now has virtually caught up MegaDrive export to the same level of brilliance. Anyway, let me just show you instead of just talking about it. So as I said, this is the current state of the MegaDrive version. So over the last several days with Eric's help and the latest updates to Scorpion Engine itself, I was able to get the MegaDrive version of Scorpion Engine looking much more polished and closer to the Amiga version. There's still some stuff here. You could see there's some weird blue anti-aliasing that doesn't belong there in the legend word, and this play and arrow are obviously completely wrong. There's still some broken stuff, but it's the level that was really broken initially the last time you guys saw it, and it's just looking much, much better now and running smoothly, with one minor exception. That is just my fault. I haven't fixed that yet. But it's running at 60 frames per second on a very accurately emulated Sega Mega Drive. And we've got, as you could see, dual play field, a lot of sliced layers, quite a few things you'll see later on screen at the same time, and it is running at 60 frames per second. So let me just play a little bit to show you. The big difference that you'll notice between this and the Amiga version is the HUD is not a bar across the bottom of the screen. I'm actually using Mega Drive sprites, since the Mega Drive can display quite a few of them per scan line. We went with the more arcadey and console-y style of floating HUD elements up at the top of the screen. It's not fully functional yet, but I did get it working already where you can swap which weapon we're using. So just to show you, like, it's like Castlevania. Up in the attack button throws the projectile weapon, and let me throw that weapon down here so you could see it actually function the way it's supposed to. But you could see the other thing that's really cool. It's really cool to work on, and that's the other. I keep saying cool. This other fantastic thing about Scorpion Engine is you can very easily and painlessly develop a game simultaneously for multiple legit retro systems. Most of your logic, most of your art is going to be the same, with some quick remaps to handle the different color depths and stuff like that. But seeing and really experiencing dealing with those differences and compensating, like, we want to make sure that each version is as good as it can be for that particular platform, meaning it's going to be better in some ways than the other platform and not as good in some ways than the other platforms. So seeing what those differences are is really cool. And one of the big differences between the Amiga and the Mega Drive is the color fidelity. So the Amiga in general, especially for like a dual playfield parallax scrolling game, you're usually going to have fewer colors on screen, but you're picking from a color range of 4,096 colors, whereas with the Mega Drive, you're picking from a color range of only 512 colors.
Mm-hmm. Which, for people that have never worked with that sort of color bit depth, you end up with like all this great nuance range in the top half of all the brightness values, and then the lower half is where you struggle to get decent colors. So you have to design your game accordingly. Thankfully, I think you took a very colorful, bright approach to the art of this game, and I think it holds up pretty well. So
beyond the darks, really losing a lot of color options in the dark ranges, the other big thing is just gradients in general. So on the Amiga, you can get a much smoother sky gradient. You could see I had to change the art quite a bit. Future Mike, remember to do a crossfade between the Amiga version and this version, but you'll see I just have fewer colors, like literally the Mega Drive. Even though I could put more colors on screen, there's no colors that exist in that color range that I can actually use to smooth out that step from that very bright sky color to this darker sky color.
Yeah, I went through this with the Damon Claw, trying to simulate Mega Drive color range. Like the backgrounds were the thing that I sat and fiddled with the most, because you need those subtle differences between the values, and that's tougher to achieve.
Yeah, especially in a back layer. You want that sense of depth, and one of the critical ways to create the illusion of depth in imagery is to have the background less sharply focused, less contrast. So smooth blending is fantastic for a background. I could have intentionally said, okay, I'm going to do a gradation from like a very warm sunsetty color at the bottom of the sky and transition up to the blues. And that trick allows you to make smoother gradations because you're stepping through the red, green, and blue. You can step through them independently, one color at a time. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm not explaining this to Corey. He is a color master with pixel art, but just for you guys following along that aren't master pixel artists. But anyway, so the way to handle it if you don't want to drastically change how the game's colors look is to change the art so that it makes more sense and it's more forgiving that there's a big step. So on the Amiga version, it is a smooth gradation of just the sky. So I textured the art to make it look like, oh, there's like a separation between cloudiness and the sky. It makes sense, therefore it's much more acceptable.
Right,
it lets the brain of the player interpret that break in gradient as much more intentional and not, oh, they dealt with the limitation and the game was downgraded for it. But anyway, so that's how it's shaping up. I will also show now some stuff. It's very funny. It's half functional. I didn't change the code yet for the MegaDrive specific version, so some wonky stuff happens, but I can show you. Oh, the time that it does still slow down, that I just need to find out a way to reprogram, is when you trigger later on in the levels, you basically trigger with your weapon these bridges that appear, like block by block, these bridges appear, these blocks appear to make a bridge. Currently, I have quite a few things on screen at the same time as that. There it goes. So I don't know if I could sense it very easily because I'm actually playing, but there was definitely some frame skips and slowdown while those tiles were appearing across the bottom of the screen. There's definitely ways I already know I could optimize it, and there's high likelihood that Eric, the programmer of Scorpion Engine, will continue to optimize things. But also, it just so happens the way I designed this temporary demonstration level, I've just got a lot of stuff on screen at the same time. So another easy fix when I'm designing real levels, I could just make sure there's not that many things, like, taking up the processor time. That's the other really funny thing. I'm hitting that jug or a pot up there, and it's shattering down here and leaving an item, and now I can't even jump back up on that sloped platform. So these are all like funny things. On the Amiga, the pot is made with a block, which is like a tile that's drawn as background graphics. We couldn't do that with the MegaDrive because the MegaDrive, unlike the 8-bit Sega Master System, which is an incredible graphics powerhouse for an 8-bit system, on the Sega Master System, you could actually draw one tile onto the same spot and then draw another tile right on top of it with transparency so you see the graphics of both tiles. It could actually do that. Believe it or not, the MegaDrive, even though it's way more powerful in most ways, it cannot do that.
Wow.
But the Amiga can. So we were using blocks on the Amiga, but we can't do that on the MegaDrive version because when you do that, when you tell it to draw a new tile, it replaces the environment graphics tile that's in that same spot. So you'd end up with a transparent rectangle border. Check out Space Harrier. Future Mike, insert Space Harrier footage. But you see what I mean? So, So basically, I replaced the tile or the block with a sprite, but I didn't update the code yet. So when you attack that pot, it gets confused because there's no longer the block that used to be the pot. It's a sprite now. The code is still telling it to do something to a block. So it's finding the soonest block that exists on screen and affecting that block instead of the pot, because the pot's no longer a block. Yeah. So so anyway, it makes funny stuff happen. And similarly, I hacked it to be functional enough to show you. You could see the text window works now when you press up at these sign-like things. But did you see an ugly miscolored sign just appeared up on the sloped platform? But anyway, that's it for Scorpion Boy, aka Aeon's Legend. Scorpion Engine continues to improve. Obviously, this is very much a side project game I dabble into every once in a great while taking a break from all the other stuff, and largely being worked on, thank goodness, with the help of Eric. But the point is, even when I'm not working on it, the very act of Eric working on Scorpion Engine and optimizing it and adding features is contributing to the progress of Aeon's Legend. That's a great way for this side project to continue to slowly make progress while we focus on the other games that'll certainly get done sooner, being obviously Damon Claw and Metro Siege. So that's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.